Yeah, thanks DGOV for having me. So basically, just I know it's a pretty quick talk, so just going to go through everything pretty quickly. So obviously, for people who don't know, it's Tezos is basically it's an upgradable platform. You can basically issue assets. You can use it for applications like Ethereum via smart contracts. Has this proof of stake mechanism. Most people are familiar with it at this point. But the thing that people talk about a lot with Tezos is that it's a meta protocol, and then it has this multi-stage formal governance mechanism. And I'll walk through basically, just briefly like who these stakeholders are. They're basically about 470 validators across like 34, 35 countries on pretty much every continent. And basically you have people mostly signing with sort of your Ledger, Trezor, et cetera. They're mostly have sort of, there's people who just have like, these offline signers all around the world securing this network. And there's about 110 of these public delegates who people can delegate their both their their stake as well as their governance rights. That's only obviously that's 110 out of 470, but we can go into basically how that works in practice. Basically, one of the cool things about this is it's not just a decision. It not only has a decision-making mechanism, it also has the ability to. It has sort of this modular architecture that allows it to. Tezos to have. It has this shell that basically allows anyone who's running a node on the network to basically sort of interact with sort of a generic protocol. So it could be you can implement Bitcoin, you can implement Ethereum, anything you want. Can basically almost, within a lot of certain constraints, but in general, it's very, very agnostic to what the underlying software it's running it actually is. And so that it's not just a decision-making process; it's also an architectural thing. And so then this slide is a little cramped, but basically this is sort of the overall process. I've presented it a bunch of times. There's a few blog posts about exactly how it works, but basically it's this basically 4-period amendment process. Basically you go through basically eight of these baking cycles per period. It starts with a proposal period where people can vote on as many proposals as they'd like. The next one has, which we're in right now in Babylon, is an exploration vote where you have to basically get a quorum of 80% of the stake. Well, it dynamically adjusts, but we'll say it started at 80% of the stake. And then you have a testing period where it forks off a test side chain where you can try out operations, basically trustlessly ensure that this new upgrade won't screw up your smart contract or or make it so that you can't you lose your money or whatever it is. And then there's a final vote after that that again requires this very high level of a very high quorum of the stake to advance. And it takes in total 3 months to complete in its current form. And so we've already done it, used it to upgrade some constants. So the idea is, we wanted to try it out. You don't want, one thing that John Light said earlier in the Aragon talk is that basically, it's very, very expensive to run these experiments, in terms of the risk that it introduces to the overall system. That's a great reason to, start off by upgrading constants rather than anything, super sophisticated or that has very big changes to the underlying protocol. So we started off, we got a really high turnout in terms of stake, sort of one of the outlier sort of examples in the industry. A lot of it is due to obviously to having a delegation model in baking and governance, but we're basically able to get about 87% of stake, about 220 bakers voted, representing about 20,000 people. And so basically, this is obviously one of the larger scale governance experiments that's happened, especially on the base layer. It's probably, one of the most, sort of the biggest, most significant outcomes in that sphere. But yeah, we did this twice, two of these votes, and then, but the point is it was mostly symbolic. So in Tezos, you can attach this 100 XDZ invoice to every proposal, or any level amount of invoice, but in this one it was a symbolic invoice, about 100 Tez. Basically, this was, again, just about changing constants. Basically changing the role size. One team was involved, but as I said, it did involve coordination of more than 200 bakers representing 20,000 delegators, and there was real economic value on the line. And if you want more on that, you can read this post reflecting on Athens. It gives you greater depth on what exactly happened there. But the point of this isn't just to upgrade constants over time. It's really to evolve the protocol, keep pace with new consensus algorithms, new innovations in the space. We're basically doing an upgrade now called Babylon, Babylon, or Baby 5 HQ, or Q, but and basically what's in that is an overhaul of the consensus algorithm, upgrade of Michelson, the smart contract language to be more like a better compilation target for high-level languages, and also actually changing the governance mechanism itself. So we changed the quorum down to 70% cap. It can never go higher than that, but you can have participation up to obviously 100. And basically we have a 5% proposal hurdle, meaning you have to get 5% of the stake to advance your proposal. And I can dive into this stuff, but I know I don't have that much time, so I'll skip ahead. But basically it's this change to the consensus algorithm, Michelson, quorum. And the big deal, what's the point, is that basically, if we pull this upgrade off, we'll basically have upgraded Tezos more in 1.5 years than Ethereum has changed in all 5. And that's actually not a dig on Ethereum. They're going after different goals at this point. Ethereum is, obviously, a lot of the community has chosen this sort of immutability path, and doing everything in Ethereum 2.0 and transitioning eventually, and that's fine. It's a different design, part of the design space. But the idea is that the idea is that we'll prove that the mechanism actually is trying to do what it set out to do, which is change the underlying protocol, basically more so than any existing one has done on the fly, with global stakeholders in, as I said, 35 countries. And basically, one of the issues is that that we have to solve is like sort of this question of downstream consequences. Wallet makers, smart contract developers, custodians, whoever have to adjust and pay attention to these upgrades. And so that's something that we're very focused on right now. And this prepares us for our medium-term goals, which are things like SNARKs, which we'll be talking about soon at our conference on Thursday. Tender rate consensus and other things. And I guess I don't have that much time, right? Probably out. Or?
You could go, but that would give us a couple questions.
Okay. Yeah, and so then another thing we're really focused on is sort of the off-chain side. And so in these previous amendments that I've just shown, basically we've had really fractured off-chain coordination. And basically, we're basically been working, a bunch of us have been working on sort of a system to do this in a decentralized way, sort of structure this and visualize it all in a decentralized way, basically with a project called Tezos Agora. And it's sort of with the idea that the existing Web 2.0, options that we have, whether that's Reddit or Twitter or not, are very bad discussion forums for this sort of thing. And also that many people have trouble understanding how these processes work, and you want it to be so that people can just immediately come into the space and at least understand or not feel intimidated by how the process works, what's going on, the current status of it, et cetera. And so as with Tezos, it's continuous but in stages. And so initially, when this is very imminent, we're going to launch this discussion forum and amendment process visualization and everything. And then in the second version, we're going to basically, we're basically watching what's happening with Moloch DAO, with 3box, with all of these cool, DX DAO, et cetera. And we'll be hopefully, sort of implementing some of these experiments through this Agora platform. And then with T-Quorum Berlin, so we're having our own conference day on Thursday. We have about, I think, 8 or 9 presentations and workshops. Please come by if you're around. Thanks. Or I guess yeah.
I got a lot of questions.
Okay.
Okay, one question from me. Maybe it's like not like you're the best person I know, like in the Tezos space. So I'll ask you, like culture-wise, what would you say is the major difference between Ethereum and Tezos community?
So there's definitely way more of an academic focus on the technical side. Like the developers, a lot of them have PhD. There's a much bigger focus on core development. So there's a lot bigger. So a lot of things that people are like experimenting with in Ethereum, and there's 7 projects in that space. We think a lot of that gets commoditized and added to the core. So we have sort of this culture around like this. We have this decentralized core community. We have core teams in Japan, in the US, in France, and multiple in France, and basically, and also Cryptium Labs in Switzerland. But basically, we have a much more robust culture around adding things to the, or ideology almost, about adding things to the base layer, more academic focus around formal verification, and only wanting to deploy things if they're we know that they're safe and we know that they're, they work. Maybe that isn't the best, we'll see which these experiments work, but I think that's generally the biggest technical cultural difference. But also in general, I think I don't know, it's sort of easier to tell when you go to the actual Tezos events and stuff, you sort of do see the distinction. And there's also a much bigger focus on, sort of believing that this is specifically for economic use cases and for rights, like things like DAOs and legal things and whatever, and not as much of a focus on like a world computer type thing, at least not at this point.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks.